Hey everyone, my name is Matt with We're in the Rockies, and I just returned from spending 2 full days in Yellowstone National Park after the floods of 2022. I visited by myself and did a ton of things, including hiking, biking, geyser gazing, getting stuck in bison jams, and more. Some of the things I did were far off the beaten path, so if you want to get away from the crowds, check out some of these underrated things to do in Yellowstone National Park. So to get this video started, we're gonna go to Madison Valley on the west side of Yellowstone. This is the Madison River here right beside me. It's a very underrated little valley here. Now you drive through this if you come in through the West Yellowstone Gate. But for those of you that don't come in through the West Yellowstone Gate, a lot of people don't think about it. But just about every time I come through here, I see wildlife. I see elk, coyotes, buffalo. This is a wonderful little valley that's quite underrated. Now this little river here, the Madison River, actually flows out of the park into the Missouri River. It actually helps start the Missouri River. There's 3 rivers. A little place called Three Forks, Montana is where the Missouri River begins. This one flows into it. Named after President James Madison, it was named by Lewis and Clark as they came out west. The Madison River begins right here in Yellowstone at Madison Campground. And it's just a lovely river, a beautiful little valley. Not to be confused with Madison Canyon, which is outside of the park at Hebgen Lake and was the site of the 1959 Yellowstone earthquake. Okay, the next thing to do is to visit Lower Geyser Basin. So Lower Geyser Basin is really cool in Yellowstone because you can see all 4 types of geothermal activity here, or geyser activity. So there's steam vents, there's mud pots, there's gorgeous blue hot springs, and then there's geysers. And the cool thing about this is you're guaranteed to see a geyser go off. You know why? Because this is called Kepler Geyser, and it never stops erupting. It started in 1959 during that Yellowstone earthquake of 1959, and it has not stopped erupting since, which is insane. Very fun, and a really, really cool scenic place to walk around. Don't forget about Lower Geyser Basin. Okay, the next thing to do is to ride a bike. Yellowstone's not really known as a biking park, but I have found a lot of joy recently in bringing our bikes to the park. There are plenty of areas, kind of short little trails that you can ride on the bike, including around here at the Upper Geyser Basin. Let's hope I don't fall over while I'm doing this. At the Upper Geyser Basin, there is a road, like a paved track here, that goes out to the end of the basin where you can see Morning Glory Pool. And it's a great way to get around and see some of the geysers here. Remember that there are more geysers here at the Upper Geyser Basin than just Old Faithful. There's plenty erupting. As you're walking around, you'll see them going off all over the place. So a bike is a pretty fun way to get around pretty quickly. And by the way, you can rent these at the Old Faithful Lodge while you're here at the Upper Geyser Basin. And that would be a great little family activity. Okay, the next thing to do is to visit Kepler Cascades. This is one of many waterfalls located on the Grand Loop Road. Super easy to get to. Yellowstone is full of waterfalls like this. Easy to check out if you know how to fit them into your schedule. Okay, the next thing to do is to watch Lone Star Geyser erupt. This is about a 5-mile round trip hike to get here, which means it's very secluded. There's only a few people here watching this. It erupts every 3 hours, so you don't really have to wait that long to see an eruption. And the bonus is you can ride your bike out here, which is what I did. It is a pretty ride. It's a pretty geyser. It's pretty fun to be out here with just a few people watching this thing go off. Okay, the next thing to do is to stop and see the Continental Divide here. So what this is any water that falls on one side of this line will go to the Pacific Ocean, empties out the Pacific Ocean. Any water that falls on the other side of this line will make its way to the Missouri River, to the Mississippi River, and out to the Atlantic Ocean. So the Rocky Mountains are like the rooftop of the country. What's really weird about this is the Continental Divide actually intersects the Lower Loop Road twice, and that's because it kind of squiggles around a little bit. The other strange thing about this is nearby there is a river called Two Ocean River. The river actually divides into 2. One will end up going to the Pacific, one end up going to the Atlantic, so they called it Two Ocean River. Crazy. It's just a little roadside stop here. It's really nothing much, but you can say you've been to the rooftop of America. Okay, the next thing to do is to visit West Thumb Geyser Basin. This is located right along the shore of Lake Yellowstone, and for that reason it's a very popular geyser basin to visit. It has some really deep, beautiful blue hot springs, and then you get to walk right along the edge of the lake. And some of the geysers are actually in the lake, which is kind of cool. You get some good views of the mountains across the lake. Really wonderful little geyser basin. And if you really want to get away from the crowds, consider 2 hikes near West Thumb. One which leads through some meadows to an overlook of Yellowstone Lake, and another densely wooded hike ending in Duck Lake. Just make sure to bring bear spray if you do either of these hikes. Okay, so the next thing is to camp in Yellowstone. Now there are, I think, 12 campgrounds in Yellowstone, and I have done a whole video on what you need to know about camping in Yellowstone, as well as an article with all the detailed information. So make sure to check that out in the description. But I wanted to show you, I camped here last night at Bridge Bay Campground, and check it out. We've got a couple of bison, actually. There's a couple of them just roaming around the campground. This is Yellowstone for you. Okay, up next is Natural Bridge. So this is not one of the main attractions in Yellowstone. This is a nice chance for me to go around and explore some of the off the beaten path attractions in Yellowstone. So, you know, my thoughts about this are, first of all, the hike is very easy to get here. It's flat and paved and it's short. It's located by Lake Yellowstone. So right after this, I'm gonna go on a boat ride on Lake Yellowstone. And then I'm kind of amazed. We always say Yellowstone is like many parks in one. Yellowstone kind of has everything. Yellowstone even has arches, so that's pretty cool. It's not a huge attraction, but one of the fun things is you get to walk up on top of the arch, and it's got a nice little waterfall and stream coming through it. So Natural Bridge is another thing to put on your list. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention is that you can also bike here to this bridge, so that's what I did to cut off some of that hiking time. Okay, the next thing to do is a boat ride on Yellowstone Lake. So I am here at Bridge Bay Marina. This is the main marina, and there are a number of different options that you can do here. You can rent your own boat and take it out there. You can bring your own boat, take it out there. You can get kayaks and go around the bay here. Now, Yellowstone Lake is considered like the largest high elevation lake in the nation, and it is huge. It's 20 miles long, 14 miles wide. It's pretty rough waters. It's not a place you want to go swim in necessarily, but going out boating and fishing and all that is popular. What I did was a scenic cruise. It's a 1-hour cruise. They take you out to Stevenson Island. They take you around Lake Hotel and Lake Lodge, and they tell you all the stories about it. They'll tell you stories about the insane Mr. E.C. Waters, who ran the early boat tours here and actually was banned from the park for bad behavior. This is back in the 1800s and early 1900s. And he built a massive ship that he after he got banned, it was just stranded out there at Stevenson Island. It ended up getting shipwrecked and crashed on the shore of the island, and so you can actually see the wreckage there. The great way to see Yellowstone Lake, which is one of the main attractions in Yellowstone, but a little hard to actually experience it except just from the coast unless you do a boat ride. Okay, so the next thing to do is to visit the lake area. So there is kind of a little village along the edge of Yellowstone Lake, and there's quite a bit going on here. So there's Lake Yellowstone Hotel, which is a yellow building that's quite elegant. It was built in the early 1900s. It does have some little yellow cabins out back as well that you can stay, but it's got fine dining and kind of upscale hotel. Although, keep in mind, in Yellowstone, everything is rustic. So there's no TVs, no air conditioning at any of these hotels. They are pretty rustic, no internet. So you're kind of off the grid. That's the point of it here. Now, I am sitting at the Lake Lodge, so this is a more rustic approach, and this is also in the lake area. Again, food, lodging, and cabins here. And then they have a little general store where you can get something to eat as well. I got nachos and an ice cream. So if you'd like, take a little time to walk around the edge of the lake here and sit in some chairs and just enjoy some really nice views. Up next is Lehardy Rapids. Again, not a main stop in Yellowstone, but kind of a cool thing to do. What's really cool about this is there are Yellowstone cutthroat trout. This is a native species here. And what they do is they migrate upstream. So here you can see them leaping out of the water as they're traveling upstream. Now, cutthroat trout in Yellowstone is a whole story in and of itself. There are non-native species that are kind of damaging the Yellowstone cutthroat trout, but they are working on improving that and getting rid of the non-native species and restoring the cutthroat trout here. This is a pretty cool place to see them. Plus, off in the distance, you can't really see it in this video here, but there are some harlequin ducks here. So, a pretty cool place to come and see some fowl and some fish. Okay, the next thing to do is to visit Mud Volcano. This is another geyser area, one of the few that are on the east side. Now, this one's a little sort of maybe underrated a little bit, or maybe not as popular. And that's because most of these, as the name implies, are kind of mud pots, boiling mud pots. This thing is crazy though. This is churning cauldron behind me. Look, this is just like a boiling, just a boiling mud pit here. So this area is really stinky. Okay, it smells like rotten eggs all over the place here. The early explorers were quite fascinated with the mud pots. Most people today tend to like the beautiful blue deep hot springs over these. But the other thing you can see here is Dragon's Mouth, which is a steam vent. And there's a very nice, beautiful loop that you can go for a walk on here. If you take a little bit of time and give them a chance, I think you'll kind of like some of these mud volcanoes. Okay, the next thing to do is a horseback ride. So in Yellowstone National Park, there is a concessionaire, Xanterra, that operates horseback rides. They do it from two different places, Roosevelt and Canyon. Just a little bit about the horseback rides real quickly. I did the 1 hour ride. It does take you through some really beautiful meadows and some overlooks, like you get some nice panoramic overlooks like you can see behind me here. Now, if you come to Yellowstone expecting to see beautiful mountain scenery on something like this, probably be a little disappointed. That's because most of the mountains were actually blown away by that volcano, that volcanic eruption 650,000 years ago or something like that. So you don't tend to get that. If you want that, you go down to Grand Teton National Park. That's probably the more famous and better spot to do some horseback riding. But I will say this was really nice. Yellowstone, you get more beautiful meadows and greenery and stuff like that. It really was a pretty ride. This is also a ride for beginners, so they do what they call nose to tail riding. That means you're all in a line, and they read us a list of rules about the length of my arm before we left, so it is very controlled. It's very much for beginners. If you want something a little bit more maybe intense, or a little bit more maybe exciting, then there are plenty of options around Yellowstone, and there are also a number of concessionaires. Their base of operations is outside of Yellowstone, but they do rides within Yellowstone, so they're not quite as regulated by the park system as this company is. 1, 2, 3, okay, the next thing to do is to see Mount Haynes right here. This is in Madison Valley. Now, I stopped here to see Mount Haynes, but right there in those trees is a black bear right now, which was such a cool coincidence. Real quick about Mount Haynes. This was named after an early park photographer named Frank J. Haynes, who looked like Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec and was a super cool guy. And he made one of the very first guides to Yellowstone National Park, which means a lot to me because when I made my guide for Yellowstone, I designed it after the Haynes guide of the late 1800s and early 1900s. So stop and say hi to Frank J. Haynes for me at Mount Haynes here. Very cool mountain peak named after this very cool guy. If you are thinking about visiting in 2022, my verdict is you still should do it. There's so much to do. You're gonna have a great time. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, go west, young traveler.